Discover the untold story of college hookup culture with American Hookup by Lisa Wade. This insightful and engaging audiobook explores the complexities of modern relationships on campus.
Cassidy routinely brought men back to their shared room, and it quickly became clear that she was perfectly happy to have sex with her roommate present. The first time it happened, Jimena was watching TV on her computer in bed. It was about 4 in the afternoon, sunny outside, on the second Saturday since they'd moved in. Cassidy and a guy named Declan had been drinking most of the day and had just come back in from smoking weed. Someone said something about dinner, again, and Declan turned to Cassidy, pulled down her navy blue leggings and underwear, and exclaimed, "Dinner's right here!" Cassidy squealed and laughed, falling back on the bed. He climbed on top of her as Jimena spun to face her computer and the wall. "What's happening?" she cried. Cassidy replied, "Segs is happening." Jimena froze with her back to the pair. "I was in shock," she said, when I asked her why she didn't flee the room. She had never seen 2 consenting adults having segs before, and she was afraid to look. Leaving seemed like the obvious thing to do, but climbing down from her bunk, collecting her things, and getting out the door would have required her to open her eyes. It was strangely easier to just wait it out. So, that's what she did, catching reflected glimpses of Declan's bobbing buttocks each time her screen went black between commercials. Cassidy would have sex in front of Jimena 3 times that semester. By the 3rd time, Jimena had figured out how to spot the early signs and quickly gather her things and get out. Students call it being sexiled, though usually they are given fair warning to get out or stay clear. When she explained to her roommate that this made her uncomfortable, Cassidy would agree to be more respectful, and her exhibitionism would die down for a while, but it was never gone for good. In any case, even when Jimena was spared the front row seat, Cassidy was eager to share all the details of each and every sexual encounter. "It irritates me," Jimena wrote, but she was a conciliatory person and wanted to get along. Most abstainers did not have a roommate like Cassidy, though many found themselves occasionally sexiled. Even those who didn't have sexually active roommates felt surrounded by hookup culture, if less explicitly. Petra's experience was more typical. Like Jimena, she had no interest in going to its parties. She and her roommate, she wrote, do not like to drink or smoke, nor was she interested in what she knew happened as the night progressed. How could someone, she wondered. She spent most evenings in her dorm room and, especially on Friday and Saturday nights, hookup culture swirled around her. It was routine for her to shuffle in her slippers past women taking selfies in miniskirts. She would brush her teeth alongside women applying eyeliner and listen to them rev one another up for the hunt. She complained gently about the noise. You can hear every conversation occurring in the hallway, even with your door closed, because of the cinder block walls and tile floors. For hours, she wrote, she would listen to the click-clacking of high heels. Eventually, the women in heels would leave, rowdily, and there would be a reprieve. But they'd come back drunk and disorderly, now with arguments, toasts, crying spells, and elated congratulations. Petra documented one particularly sleepless night. She was jolted awake by someone exclaiming, "I am so fucked up right now," outside her window. It was 3 a.m. The house party had been shut down, and the revelry had moved to the small courtyard between one wing of her residence hall and the other. Students were laughing, chasing one another like schoolchildren, tackling each other on the lawn, and tripping into the bushes underneath Petra's window. Their voices rang across the courtyard as they squealed, called out to one another, and belted out drinking songs. They were totally wasted, Petra recalled. Sometimes overhearing her dorm mates' excitement about partying and hooking up made her question her priorities. I feel like I am kind of a weirdo, she wrote late one night. Like Jasleen, she wondered if she was missing out. Other abstainers worried too, calling themselves outcasts, losers, and prudes. Many said that they felt lonely, isolated, or pathetic. One wrote that hookup culture effectively forces people to have sex or be seen as some sort of pariah.
Some of my abstainers' sense of exclusion came not from the decision to abstain itself, but from the fact that they weren't part of hookup culture's conversation. Remember that most students aren't hooking up much to begin with. So it wasn't just the hooking up that made abstainers feel left out. It was their inability to take part in the talk about hooking up. On campus, sexual speculation abounds. Facebook stalking, Instagram hearting, Snapchatting, swiping right, flirting, whispering, relaying messages, and deciphering cryptic texts. Students spend the week planning the weekend. Which parties will they go to? Where do they think other people are going? Who do they want to hook up with? Who do they want to avoid? Every conversation that my friends and I have, one of my male students wrote excitedly, revolves around sex in some way. Hookup culture is all over the place on campus, wrote another. Every conversation, every meeting is used to create a platform for a potential sexual encounter to occur, wrote a third. Sometimes the subtle flirting and not so subtle propositioning turns into real action. Or, to put it another way, it becomes fodder for the recap. Mornings after big party nights, there's a ritual retelling of the night before. Students fill their friends in on blurry memories, reassure one another that they didn't act too crazy, stroke the egos of disappointed friends, and brag. At the University of Southern California, students call it the morning debrief. It takes up, like, half our day, said one. Talking about it is, like, the best. Who did you hook up with last night? Is the common question asked every Sunday morning at Tulane and Connecticut College. Romantic entanglements at this school, wrote a woman enrolled at Whitman, end with some juicy new gossip to share at brunch the next morning. Most hooking up happens so that someone can say they did something, confirmed one of my female students. Being able to answer yes to the simple question, did you get some, prompts a dramatic play-by-play. Doing things outside of students' everyday sexual repertoire is especially exciting, earning others awe and envy. Anything out of the ordinary, sex in the laundry rooms or in the baseball dugout, sex with ice cubes or erotic toys, threesomes or foursomes, anything new or audacious, can mean an hour or more of story time. Students go back to their rooms after brunch to edit and upload photos and stories to social media. I think a lot of our hookup culture and party culture is glamorized, wrote one student, referring to sites like Instagram and Facebook. A big part of these parties, another explained, is also taking mobile pictures, and their sole purpose is so one's whole social network can see that one is having a great time at college. For at least one of my abstainers, this had a fortunate upside. Marisol described her previous educational experiences as freakishly sheltered. She attended private religious schools that, she laughed, were this sort of rare institution that many believe went extinct right along with orange lipstick. Students were taught that putting on makeup in front of a man was equivalent to undressing in front of him, and watched a film in which Ted Bundy, the serial killer, attributed his murderousness to pornography. To my high school, Marisol wrote, sex was the sole reason for teenage corruption.
Despite all the fear-mongering, she fell in love with a boy in her sophomore year of high school. Then, the unimaginable happened. One night, he asked very nicely if he could put his fingers inside her, and she was struck by a great terror. A panic gripped me so deeply I couldn't breathe, she recalled. I started saying no very loudly repeatedly, and then burst into tears. In that moment, memories of being sexually molested as a small child came flooding back to her. Marisol was devastated. She tried to reconcile the messages she had received her entire life, that sex was terribly immoral, and that sexually active girls would be punished by God, with the sudden realization that she had been touched sexually and perhaps penetrated. She looked around at her high school friends and felt a painful and isolating shame. All of these girls were completely sexually pure, and I had unwillingly experienced sex. For years, Marisol held these feelings close to her chest, in silent pain. Arriving at college changed this. If her high school friends had had positive or negative sexual experiences, Marisol didn't know, but her college friends weren't so reserved. On campus, she wrote, women talked openly and freely about sex, and many of them, like her, had stories of rape, abuse, and molestation. Being around these women gave Marisol a new way to think about what had happened to her. I have met many girls here who have been sexually assaulted, raped, and molested, and have lived through it, she explained. I have been able to truly realize that being molested is simply something that happened to me. It is not and never will be the person I am. For some abstainers, being around people who were open about their sexual activity was quite good. Marisol needed a different way of thinking about what had happened to her, so the explicitness of hookup culture was helpful. Other students, though, with other crises, found the culture's dominance on campus to be suffocating. This was true for Laura. About a month after she described grinding as a bestial rubbing of genitals, she learned that her mom had been diagnosed with breast cancer, and she was immediately gripped by an all-consuming and intolerable dread. "In my mind," she said of the day she found out, "she is the way I saw her last at the airport." She wrote in present tense, as if to hold the memory close. "She hugs me twice ferociously, her collarbones chafing at my neck, a feeling that has come to mean love. I see the chance of rain in her eyes and give her a sideways look." "Moom," I say, in the voice of an exasperated 6-year-old girl, and she rearranges her face. I tell her I love her for the second time in 10 seconds, and it feels urgent. She rejoins quickly, and then she is in the car. I am walking away, and in spite of my bags and my irrational fear that there is no way I can make my plane, I am turning, looking back. The reasons for her mother's urgency at the airport had become all too clear, but the semester marched forward, not yielding to the life-and-death battle being fought 1,000 miles away. The week her mother underwent surgery, Laura's writing started to sound hollow, as if she were witnessing college life from far, far away. I learn about infants' ability to comprehend the continuity of objects in cognitive science class, and my mind rebuts. But my mom is in the hospital. I try to sleep, and my mind protests. "Do you know that your mom is in the hospital?" Numbly, Laura entertained her friends' dalliances in hookup culture. My friend Kelsey twirls in her new skirt, worries about a stain, clips it with a pin because it is too loose. Do I think that it will look okay if she wears it with a tight shirt? She is very, very worried about a kind of date she has with an older boy. Laura encouraged Kelsey to be herself and have a good time. I listen while she complains about him and the way he says Priuses are girl cars, she wrote. And she conceded, "Priuses may be girl cars, but does she know? Has she heard that my mom is in the hospital?" Overwhelmed with anxiety and worry, her friend's sexual and romantic flings seemed trifling, yet she felt obligated to indulge them. She pretended to care about their small interpersonal dramas, suppressing the voice inside her that was ever more insistently reminding her that her mother was sick. It was exhausting. Even the frivolous superficiality of the hookup culture, she wrote, does not come without a stifling, unbearable weight. Abstainers were at risk of being in interpersonal purgatory. Those who couldn't or wouldn't talk the talk could be invisible, unintelligible. Jimena tried adding her 2 cents, for example, but her words bounced off the collective conversation. "When I speak my mind," she wrote, "people laugh at me." She was one of the few students in my sample who would say out loud that hooking up wasn't morally acceptable for her or for anybody else.
Her peers would respond with what came to sound like a refrain. "But this is college. This is how college is, and this is the time to do this." One guy said mockingly, "Oh, what? You're saving yourself for marriage? That goes out the window when you get to college." Then he offered to hook up with her if she would consent to a threesome. Her ideas didn't fit, so neither did she. Other much less conservative students, like Violet, had a similar experience. Violet had no moral qualms about hooking up. She just felt awkward about going to parties because she had a boyfriend who lived across town, so she had nothing to contribute to the conversation on campus. She felt, moreover, that more party-oriented women were suspicious of her opinion of them. "I often feel like the other people feel like I'm judging them for drinking or hooking up," she reported, though she wasn't. This left her feeling disconnected from her peers. She had exactly 3 friends: her roommate and the 2 women who lived next door. "We stay in our dorm rooms most of the time," she confessed. She suspected that there were other women like her outside of her immediate environment, but she didn't know where they were. She was diagnosed with clinical depression in the spring and attributed it partly to the lack of fun and social support. Near the end of the year, she tried to get up the courage to go to a party. It was one of the biggest dances of the year, and everyone kept talking about it. Alone in her dorm room, she picked out an outfit, a fitted heather gray shirt with cap sleeves and black pants atop short, slouchy black boots. She liked what she saw in the mirror, but she wasn't sure what to do. The problem was, she explained, I didn't have anyone to go with. She thought about going by herself, but was nervous that she wasn't dressed quite right. Without a bunch of women to pregame with, she couldn't know what anyone else was wearing, and she didn't want to stand out. She looked at herself in the mirror again and lost heart. She flounced down on her bed, pulled off her boots, and put her pajamas back on. Like Violet, many students felt that their sex life and their social life were one and the same. They said so often and explicitly, I feel that if I don't engage in the party scene, wrote one, I am excluded from making friends with many of my fellow classmates. Partying and hooking up, insisted another, is the only way to make friends. Hookup culture equals social life, another concluded, simply making an equation. If you do not have sex, one student wrote forcefully, you are not in the community. But why didn't Violet make friends with Emery, the romantic, Jimena, Laura, or Petra, or any of the other abstainers who lived more than a dorm room away? A third of students opted out, certainly enough to build a vibrant alternative community. If abstainers were lonely, it wasn't because they were alone. This flummoxed sociologists Elizabeth Armstrong and Laura Hamilton too. For their research, they secured a room in a residence hall and put together a team of graduate and undergraduate students to occupy it. They stayed throughout the academic year, becoming a part of the lives of the women who lived on the hall. They found students like Violet at their college as well, ones who didn't make friends with either their party-oriented peers or one another. They came to call students like these isolates. Eventually, they concluded that isolates were so isolated that they didn't even realize that other isolates were out there. One of their students, for example, said, I would hear things going on and kind of feel left out because all the other women were friends, revealing by her choice of words that she believed she was uniquely friendless, the only person on the floor who didn't bond with her dormmates. Students who are actively partying and hooking up occupy a lot of psychic space. On the quad, they're boisterous and engage in loud greetings. They sunbathe and play catch on the green at the first sign of spring. At games, they paint their faces, throw their hands in the air, and sing fight songs. They use the campus as their playground. Their bodies, most often white, slim, athletic, and well-dressed, convey an assured calm. They move among their peers with confidence and authority. For some reason, observed one of my Latina students, they exude dominance. All that click-clacking up and down the hallway, hooting and hollering about hookups, and uploading, tagging, and liking online make them hypervisible. Everyone else fades in comparison. Imagine for a moment Mara, Naomi, and the guy with sunglasses on the lawn of that 126-year-old frat house. These are the ones who say yes, who are eager or at least willing to sample what hookup culture has to offer. Zoom out and you can see the entire university. Classrooms, labs, offices, and administrative buildings, theaters, auditoriums, and galleries, sports fields, stadiums and gymnasiums, health clinics and counseling centers, and residence halls, cafeterias, bookstores, and student centers. Pull a little farther out and you'll see the late-night eateries, drugstores, coffee shops, and entertainment options that serve the campus community, where students buy cold medicine, study, volunteer, catch movies, fall in love, and make friends. Zoom out that far, and you can see the total institution with its myriad functions. Fun, yes, but also education, research, art, athletics, sustenance, wellness, and jobs that help pay the bills. In that mix is Petra listening to her floor mates get ready for parties, Ren seeking a queer erotic community, Jasleen doing G-rated things, Asao attending raves, Jimena ducking out of her dorm room, Riley trying to loosen up, Kimley waiting for the library to open, Alondra dodging Murphy makeouts, Laura agonizing over her mom's illness, Emery happily waiting for love, Rosalind wondering if rich students study, Violet holed up in her dorm room, and all of the other students who animate this book. Zoom out, and you see the whole range of personalities and experiences. There is a wide range of students on campus, but the diversity is sometimes invisible because of the nearly exclusive focus on the ones who flock to the parties to hook up. For better or worse, they have been held up as the model for what college life should be like, ever since Life conflated fraternity culture with youth culture in the 1920s. And still today, since they make for much more salacious stories, they're usually the only students who appear in the news and opinion pages, whether the spin is positive or negative. When we zoom in on wherever it is that students like Mara, Naomi, and men in sunglasses go to party, we lose sight of a full third of the college population: the abstainers, the romantics, the devout, and those who are too worried to have sex for fun. And they pay a price. To not hook up can mean missing out on friendships, adventures, and the collective conversation. It can feel like they're missing out, even on the whole college experience. The other 2/3 of students are not willing to miss out. They decide that social irrelevance is too considerable a penalty to pay, or they're curious about casual sex, or they get swept into the inevitable hookups, or they believe that college is the time to go a little wild. And so they do. Opting in, the gay liberation movement began on a Friday. It was summer in New York. It was 1969. The event was routine: a police roundup of the motley crew that frequented the Stonewall Inn, one of Greenwich Village's known gay bars. But that night, the bar's regulars had had enough. The scene became explosive, reported the Village Voice. The gay, trans, and genderqueer men and women of the bar fought back. They pelted the police officers with pocket change, beer cans, and bottles, shouting "Gay power!" The police were forced to barricade themselves inside the bar. The sound filtering in from outside didn't suggest dancing faggots anymore, recalled a reporter inside with them, describing it as like a powerful rage bent on vendetta. They set the place on fire. When more officers arrived, they were able to temporarily beat back the rebellion and snuff out the flames, but there was no stopping the revolt. The next night, more than 1,000 people returned to protest on behalf of gay rights. The civil disobedience lasted several days. A few weeks later, members of the queer community in New York formed the Gay Liberation Front. On the first anniversary of the Stonewall Rebellion, the first gay pride parades were held in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and San Francisco. Before long, the American Psychological Association would retract its claim that homosexuality was a mental disorder. 4 years later, there were almost 800 gay and lesbian organizations in the United States. Inspired by "Black is beautiful, gay is good" became a rallying cry, and gay men and lesbians began coming out in record numbers.